Rob Roberts.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. My honour indeed to follow the honourable gentleman whose passion on this subject is well known both in, and I say to someone who is new to this place and has been a member of the public until recently, is very well known outside of this place as well. Mr Deputy Speaker, the words scandal and crisis are bandied around far too cheaply these days. Their overuse cheapens actual scandals and crises like this one. Windrush was a scandal, and one that should never have happened. The contribution made by Windrush immigrants and their descendants to this country is beyond measure, and what they've brought to this country has shaped the cultural and industrial makeup in a way for which we should always be thankful. The government has not forgotten this and is working hard to rectify the wrongs faced by Windrush victims. However, it is important that we recognise these mistakes couldn't be fixed overnight. They do, unfortunately, as many of the workings of government, take time. The launch of the Windrush compensation scheme goes to show that the work that this government is willing to do to ensure that those who face the uncertainty that Windrush presented are showed that they are valued. As many honourable and right honourable members, many of whom have been in this House for much longer than I have, will be aware from previous casework, as soon as the issues surrounding these immigration statuses arose, the government did immediately begin to try and right the wrongs that victims had faced. UK Visas and Immigration set up a dedicated team to help those people who previously had no evidence of their right to be here to receive the documentation that they needed. There is now a dedicated contact point tasked with resolving cases within 2 weeks of evidence being provided, and all documentation awarded comes at no cost to the victim, with their legal and citizenship costs also being covered. The government also quickly implemented a 5-month consultation period, which eventually attracted over 1,400 responses. This was complemented with a number of focus group sessions in order to truly uncover where the need for compensation rests. In the government's response to the consultation released in April last year, and on the same day that the compensation scheme opened, they not only fully acknowledged the harm done, but went beyond the Windrush generation to accommodate anyone who may have been impacted by historical immigration laws. And the cohort of people eligible will be much wider than the Windrush generation itself. The requirements of the scheme, while being set by the government, come from direct advice of those people who took part in that consultation. This shows that the government are not merely throwing money at the issue, but have taken the advice of those people who were impacted, their friends and their families, and that victims are getting a suitable remedy to their individual cases to compensate for the losses they may have experienced due to their past immigration status.
Would the honourable gentleman...
Certainly.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way, and maybe he's not totally aware of all the issues surrounding the Windrush carry-on, we'll call it, because this had been raised repeatedly with many government ministers on multiple occasions before finally they were shamed into taking action. This went on for years. I myself had been raising the issue for 3 years before 2018 when the government finally decided to take action. So I understand he's new to the place and maybe doesn't know the history of it, but it's not correct to say the government acted quickly when they became aware of this issue.
Thank the honourable lady for that intervention. And she makes a very, very valid point. Look, there were many issues that came up, and the issues that did come up were due to measures from successive governments that have been going on for many years, since the 1980s. So I completely understand, I'm completely aware of what the honourable lady says, and perhaps if I continue a little, the answers to her questions may become a little bit more apparent. I understand that the estimates for the Home Office from the compensation scheme will cost between 120 and 310 million to cover the thousands of claims that are expected to arise, which not only includes primary claimants but also covers close family members of those affected, and indeed, as was mentioned earlier on opposite, the estates of deceased members. To say that the government doesn't care and isn't doing enough to assist victims is just disingenuous and an affront to those efforts that they are putting in to apologise for errors made and safeguard all those affected. Those who apply under the scheme are also eligible for payments to cover up to 8 different areas where their life may have been impacted, with some collective payments having potential to be in the tens of thousands of pounds, depending on the severity of the case. As honourable members have mentioned, the speed of things that are being processed, quite right, over 1,100 people have submitted claims so far, and yes, only a small number have seen some form of recompense for the mistakes that have been made. But the immediate work that the government have put in to repairing the damage done shows that while many are still waiting for compensation, this is, as my right honourable friend at the dispatch box mentioned earlier, because all cases are being treated with the individual attention that they rightfully require. Some payments are much harder to assess than others, in particular the impact on life reward, which will take a number of different factors into account, and there are no 2 cases that will be the same, and each one needs to be examined and assessed for their unique level of compensation.
Will you allow me?
Certainly.
I'm most grateful to him, but he just reminds me, I think in exceptional circumstances like this, members of Parliament who might have access to the community and people who know the victims might have an additional role to play in helping administer the scheme, or at least advising those who are administering the scheme. And I wonder whether the Minister might commit today to doing a Dear Colleague letter to all members of this House to set out how members of Parliament can help the victims in a constructive way that's not too burdensome to officials operating the scheme.
Well, my honourable friend preempted that I was about to refer back to his speech earlier on and say that unlike some comments that we heard earlier on where there was questions to the Home Office and to the Minister to say, what are you going to do to help these people, my honourable friend in Wickham has taken this on and found them himself and gone about the work directly to try and offer the help that his constituents need. So I completely agree.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'll keep this brief, but I'm more than happy to give that commitment to put out a Dear Colleague letter of the nature described.
Thank you, and very, very grateful to the Minister for that statement. Mr Deputy Speaker, as I mentioned earlier in my speech, the Windrush was a terrible mistake that should never have been allowed to happen. The fact that people could live in this country for so long only for them and their families to face the daily hardships is undeniably acceptable. Yet the efforts put in by my right honourable friend to ensure that the mistakes are being remedied are a great step towards ensuring that those impacted will see the compensation and security that they deserve. I'd like just, in winding up, Mr Deputy Speaker, to echo the sentiments of my honourable friend, the member for St Austell and Newquay. I admit, to my regret, that before this terrible situation was brought to light, up in leafy North Wales, I'd never heard the term Windrush. I have, over the last few years, had occasion to look into the events, and as my honourable friend mentioned, those individuals and families who came to the UK all those years ago came at our request to help us when we desperately needed their help. Their sacrifices and selfless acts deserved much more than we gave them. The events of this scandal have shamed us all, and as many other members today and previously have stated, we unreservedly apologise. Hopefully, the Minister can, in his closing remarks later on, assure me and those in my Delling constituency who may have been impacted by Windrush that he is planning to take on the advice given by the Lessons Learned Review and reassure me that they should not be in any doubt about their status in this country, that they have called home for so long and will, of course, see the compensation that their individual cases deserve.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and it's a pleasure to follow the new member for Delling giving, I don't think it's his maiden speech, but certainly an opening speech in this debate.